one of those things that you just don't ever think about. It was cute. Yeah. So I got to revisit a lot of memories. My brother's already in there, and I had to pack those up.
I mean, that's just when they announced it. Yeah, it's always a late given out. But if you go to PMASAT link, on the right hand side, they just announced it. Unless they gave us the information. We just announced it. To recognize felons.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, 2016, we announced like 4 weeks ago. And then they go from the fireworks that ran to before we announced the name, we're actually late.
So last time it trips to the yeah. My daughter called us. 2 o'clock Saturday morning. Upset.
Oh, no.
We're going to call the meeting to order.
Just
I know it.
Just good fun.
We're going to call the meeting to order, please. Good with that. First on the agenda, we're going to, if I can get a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No nays. Motion carried. Okay. Next on the agenda, Presenter Greg Rogers, State Procurement Process Timeline. Am I hearing that echo, kind of like?
You are.
All right, good evening. My name is Greg Rogers. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Physical and Admin. I have Ron Burns with me too, so if I say anything wrong, he'll throw something at me. And I was just going to go over the contract procedures. There have been some questions.
Could you hold on 1 minute?
Sure.
So while they're working on that.
You sound like you belong in a Star Wars movie. Oh, and now I do too. This is thrilling. Earth to control.
Try it one more time, Mr. Rogers.
Hello? Hey.
That's better.
Folks, I'll keep working on it. I hate to delay. But
Okay, gotcha.
I will be working on it.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
All
Mr.
right.
Greg.
Okay. I'm going to go over some of the stuff that was in your agenda. I've got a few more things, just a little more detail on it. The first one you'll see on the slideshow is just where we've given you a definition of what professional and consulting services contracts are, as well as the technical service and general services contract. The professional consulting contracts are just those that involve a more defined contract where you have to have specialized license or degrees. The technical general services contracts are going to be those that are standard, that are off-the-shelf type contracts that you could do. And then in both of those contracts, there's what they call a sole source requirement. And in a sole source requirement, that is where there's only one person or a company that could be specialized in whatever the contract you're trying to do. For doing contracts with the state, you'd have to allow for a 5-month lead time before you get anything started with them. And if it's going to be an IT contract over $100,000 or any contract over $1 million, before you can even start the bid approval, we'll need to get approval from DFA, DIS, and the governor's office. When considering going into any kind of contract, you have to take into the total amount for the entire contract. So if it's going to be longer than a 1-year contract, the entire life of that contract has to be accounted for in the total amount when you're doing the bid process. So if it's going to be a 3-year contract and the first year is only going to be $50,000, but by the time you get at the end of it, it's going to be $150,000. The total bid has to be for $150,000, which would require to go through all the different aspects of getting approval from the different entities. Here's where getting into a little bit more of the specifics of it. If it's a good or if it's a contract under $10,000, then no bids would be required. However, our procedures require for at least 2 different verbal quote bids. If it's $10,000 and under $50,000, it has to be a quote bid or has to have a sole source justification. And the sole source justification is done by DFA. They're the ones that approve the sole source. And there's 7 very specific questions that you have to go through in a letter format before a sole source can be approved. Anything over $50,000 is going to have to be a competitive seal bid or an RFP, request for proposal. And then also you can use the sole source, which also has to be justified through DFA. Any contract that you do with a government agency or an educational institution exceeding the $25,000, and anybody has to have the contract disclosure form from DFA, the EOC form, as well as illegal immigrant certification. This is the spreadsheet that was included in the agenda packet to kind of give an overall comparison of what you're looking at for any time you want to do a contract or RFP. The first column there you'll see is over the 10,000 and under 50, where go through all the different weeks. You're looking at right at 5 weeks before we can even start trying to get a contract under anything that's under $50,000. And then going across the 50,000 to 1 million non-IT is going to be about 4 months. One that's over 100,000 that is IT is going to be about 6 months. And then anything over 1 million non-IT is going to be about 5 months. If it's a sole source, it's going to add a little bit more time to that because that sole source has to be approved by DFA before we can even move forward with it. And then you'll see if it's a state entity, we have a little more leeway to be able to contract with those, and that cuts the time down significantly. So the next slides are just the flow charts that were included in the agenda. It just gives a little more detail. I won't go through each part of them, but you can see how each one of them for the under the $50,000 where it go, the different departments and entities it has to go through before it can be approved. And I won't go through the other 2 unless you just want me to, but.
Please don't. In regards to the contract that we're talking about here, and Dr. Earle, you might want to jump in here. We're trying to get some kind of feel for a timeline on this, and so I guess part of it would depend upon the amount of the contract, and I'm assuming it's going to be less than $1 million, more towards the lower end of it. But in my work, typically what we would do is issue a request for letters of interest. So anybody who is in the business of doing this kind of research would send in a letter of interest, and we'd follow that up with a request for qualifications, and then if necessary a request for proposal. So what do you foresee us doing in that regard with this contract?
If you're estimating it to be less than $1 million, then then it's going to be either one of the last 2 columns on that spreadsheet Because if it gets to the $1 million, then it's going to have to be approved by DFA and the governor's office. You'll have, the request for proposal is what we'll have to do. What will have to happen is we'll have to establish a SOP, an SOW, a scope of work, and issue the RFP through DFA based off that scope of work and see who we get back. If we don't get any back at that time, then we can go to request for bids. And that's a little more specific and takes a little more time, but that obviously will go past the 4 to 5 months time frame that we're looking at there.
Okay. Dr. Earl, do you have anything to add to?
I was thinking this is one area that I am completely out of, this is not in my wheelhouse at all, is how you work through these different contracts. It is a process that is very structured, and I would be going to Greg and saying, what do we need to do next? So I don't deal with those for the department in any way, shape, or form.
Well, one of the things that concerns me is we're going to get have to report to the Board of Education here shortly, and I suspect they will ask us when we're going to be finished. And in order to know that, we kind of need to feel for when we're going to get started with the consulting stuff. So,
right, and that's one of the reasons why if I've seemed like I've been throwing certain things in front of you, it's because I'm very aware of the timeline and that there are all kinds of hoops that you jump through to get to where we need to go, and we really need to get started before we can be finished. And I think this information is helpful to kind of understand the structure under which all this has to be done, and then maybe we can come back to some of those questions at the end after you've had a chance to hear all the presentations tonight.
okay.
That work?
Yeah.
That it?
As far as I'm concerned, longer rather than sooner, it looks like, in terms of state contracting. Okay.
Okay, next on the agenda item is Forward, Arkansas.
Good evening. I'm Susan Harriman, Executive Director for Forward Arkansas, and I want to introduce to you two of my colleagues. Corey Biggs is the Associate Director, and Harvell Howard is our Operations Manager. Wanted to thank you for the invitation to speak before you tonight. Wanted to talk to you about what Forward is and what Forward believes is the vision for education for the state of Arkansas. Forward is a statewide coalition. It is a partnership of parents, educators, civic leaders, business professionals, and policymakers committed to helping every Arkansas student graduate prepared for success in college and the workplace. To realize this vision, we gathered input from nearly 8,500 Arkansans across the state to help develop a new vision for Arkansas education. Forward Arkansas is a partnership of the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, and the Arkansas State Board of Education. It is committed to helping every student graduate prepared for success in college and the workplace, and to realize the vision, the Forward Steering Committee has developed recommendations aimed at dramatically improving student achievement and closing the achievement gap and making Arkansas a leading state in education. Before we go to the recommendations, I wanted to let you know that the report is data-driven, and a lot of research was done. There is a report on our website called The State of Education, and it provides an overview of public education in Arkansas. It is a result of extensive research and features data on school performance, student demographics, test scores, and graduation rates, and more. There were 4 emerging themes in the report. We know Arkansas has been successful in improving access to education and increasing participation in higher level educational activities. We know that Arkansas has established policies and standards that should be supported and that improve student outcomes. We know that student outcomes are still far below aspirations across the state and that there is an opportunity to improve. And despite recent gains, the achievement gap is still significant, and that this is reflected in economic, racial, and regional disparities. So the goal of Forward is to make Arkansas a leading state in education and to close the achievement gap within a generation. This is a big goal. It's a bold goal. And we hope that you join us in this effort. Before we go on, I wanted to show a video. Kimberly, if you could set that up for us. This is on our website, forwardarkansas.org. I know some of you have seen this already, so.
Imagine Arkansas at the
Thank you.
forefront of public education, where every Arkansas student graduates prepared for success in college and the workplace. This isn't a dream for Arkansas, it's a vision, our vision. Forward Arkansas is a partnership of local education, business, government, and civil society leaders committed to improving public education in the state. But Arkansas can do more than improve. Arkansas can lead. So Forward set a strategic goal, becoming a leading state in education by improving student achievement at a historically ambitious yet achievable rate, and closing the achievement gap within a generation. To get there, Forward engaged nearly 8,500 Arkansans through town hall meetings, focus groups, and surveys. We asked for your vision of public education in Arkansas, and we listened. We also conducted an in-depth analysis of Arkansas's educational system, including school attendance and performance, test scores, participation rates, graduation rates, college readiness, and more. It was a lot of data, a lot of discussion, a lot of insight. And Forward used it all to develop recommendations to meet the overarching goal and dramatically improve student achievement in Arkansas. But it's not just for students. We all feel the effects of strong public education. Proven benefits include more jobs, higher incomes, better health, rising home values, increased revenue, lower crime, and more community involvement. And if we don't invest in education, we all feel those effects too. Together, we can change the future of Arkansas education. We can do this, and we will, with your help. Share your vision for improving Arkansas education. Commit to being part of the solution and learn more about the state of education in Arkansas at forwardarkansas.org.
Thank you. I want to go into a little bit more depth about our 7 goals, and then I'm going to hand it over to Corey Biggs, who's going to talk about some data that we have on Central Arkansas and discuss that with you. And then we'll close with some ideas of how we can help. One of the first goals in the Forward report is quality pre-kindergarten, and the goal is that all students, starting with those in the highest need, have access to high-quality early childhood learning opportunities, so they arrive at kindergarten ready to learn. There are 95 recommendations in the report, and there's recommendations under each one of the goals, but we won't go into that tonight. Under teaching and learning, each student is supported in developing the full range of knowledge and skills he or she needs to be successful in college and career, and that all schools have a culture of mutual respect, high expectations for all, teamwork, and continuous growth. Under the teacher pipeline, that all schools, especially those in high-need areas, have access to talented educators who have been rigorously prepared. Under support beyond the classroom, all students and families, starting with those in highest need, have access to and support in accessing the nutritional and health resources needed to come to school ready to learn. Under leadership, all education leaders put students at the center of their decisions. They work tirelessly to build and support a team and deploy resources effectively, and they hold themselves and their team accountable for enabling all children to be successful. Under academic distress, all schools in academic distress and pre-academic distress receive support and interventions that enable them to transform their school's culture, dramatically improve student achievement, and sustain their improvement over time. And the last one has to do with systems and policies. All schools, districts have sufficient funding and use resources in a way that most effectively supports student success, and the policies enable the implementation of recommendations needed for Arkansas to become a leading state in education. Like I said, these are bold goals. So we want to help everybody get there. I want to hand it over to Corey at this time. He's going to talk to you about some data that we have from our survey of the 8,500 people around the state and the focus groups that might inform some of your decision making. Corey?
Thank you. As Susan said, we had over 8,500 surveys that were conducted, 550 focus group participants, altogether just shy of 10,000 folks from all around the state that gave input into the formation of that report. Did want to pull just a handful of the questions that were asked, and these are specific to the Central Arkansas audience that responded. We first of all asked, do you think Arkansas is heading in the right or wrong direction when it comes to education? You can see there that 54% of the respondents from Central Arkansas said that we were heading the wrong direction, and wanted to point out this slide as well as the next one, which says, do you think enough is being done to improve access to quality education for all children in Arkansas, no matter where they live? That number jumped up to 62. In both cases, the Central Arkansas pool of respondents answers for wrong and for no to the second question were significantly higher than the other regions of the state by which participant responses were broken out. On the flip side, however, you can see when we asked where would you rank a quality education as essential to preparing students to succeed in school and life, combined there were 84% of respondents that placed that either at the top or near the top. When we asked how important do you think quality education is to Arkansans making family supporting wages later on, there's a very strong correlation between education and the workforce here in Central Arkansas. 84% of respondents said that was either extremely important or very important. And then we asked, how important do you think it is that quality early childhood education is an essential part of the Forward Arkansas Strategic Plan? And again, you can see 84% saying that it was either extremely important or very important. So that's probably not news to any of you, but that's sort of the dive into the Central Arkansas responses that we could pull out for you tonight. And you can see that those did make it into the list of recommendations. Here you can see our vision and our strategic goals, which Ms. Harriman discussed. And then you can see the 7 areas in which we're going to be focusing our view of state-level policy work that we can support and partner with strategic partners from around the state who are involved in education in a variety of ways to support pre-K, support outside the classroom, high-quality classroom instruction, effective leadership, the teacher pipeline, turnaround of schools in academic distress, and then the systems and policies piece, which will inevitably play into each of those other 6 areas. The other trademark of the way that Forward will be working over the coming months and years is that we're going to be based on a community-level model of engaging everyone in the educational process. We know that schools can't be the be-all, end-all for all of the issues that our students face on their way into the classroom, and so that's why we are developing Forward communities, and we're still fairly early in this process. Obviously, we're just getting going with the implementation of the recommendations in general, but we do want to be working in specific communities throughout the state. And in support of those, you can see there the list of the strategies that Forward is committed to providing, which is access to technical assistance, exposure to effective practices. We want our communities talking back and forth with one another and sharing good ideas throughout the state. That's the peer learning community, which is going to engage not just the folks in the school, but parent advocacy groups, faith-based institutions, business leaders, and other key stakeholders from each of those communities. and also providing a platform to generate local energy and momentum and statewide recognition. In general, the timeline for this first year for our community-based work is pretty broad, and so we're excited to be invited to participate and to present to groups like this and others around the state. Throughout this fall, we plan on doing a lot of listening. That's going to be the bulk of our work. We feel like we've really got to give voice to those that maybe not have had their voices heard so clearly in the past. In phase 2, starting at the end of this year and moving into the first half of next year, that's our learning phase. We want to be able to take the things that we gained from our listening and try to develop that into strategic plans for each of those communities in which we're working, where we have not just buy-in from the community members, but ownership of educational outcomes in their communities and in the state. And then phase 3 is when we hope to be taking action on those plans that have been put together by that point, and that will start sometime in 2017, and then that will carry on and be our long-term work as well.
I've got a question for you, Corey. Sure. I'm looking at a page from your report that says where the input came from, and it looks like Central Arkansas is defined as a 10 or 12 county area. Can you rattle off those counties off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, no, sir.
Okay, well, it looks like it's got our MSA. It's got, actually may not follow county boundaries. It's got the Pine Bluff MSA. We're going over to Yell County or so. Does that sound about right?
Yes, sir.
And there are little black dots in there that says where the input came from. That looks like mainly Pulaski County, maybe Cabot, and then Jefferson County. Is that?
Yes, sir.
So that's where those pie charts.
Those data points came from. That's
okay.
Correct.
Any more questions for Ms. Edwards?
I just have just a quick question. I noticed in the presentation some of the things that you want to do in these communities. Can you explain how your efforts may be different than some of the other community efforts that have happened with other community groups, say Arkansas Public Policy Panel or Rural Community? Because some of these goals or activities seem similar to those other organizations. So what different spin do you bring to the table that would make you more successful or help you to be as successful as those organizations?
Well, of course, we'll be building on the work that others have done before us. And there'll be places where we'll be more effective than others. We hope to hear from all voices in a community. We also believe that the stability of having both foundations behind us will help maybe bring a more consensus within communities, knowing that these foundations and the State Department of Education have reached some common ground and believe that there are some things we can work on together. So hopefully we'll put our heads down and get some good work done.
Ms. Verdi.
Thank you. Is there anything in your report or in your research around outcomes for students who maybe aren't college bound? So students who are receiving special education services, who require a lot of intensive supports. I know that in the disability community, the outcomes for those students in terms of employment and post-secondary options are not great. Is there anything in your report to address the needs of that population?
The report itself didn't go into that level of specificity. That would certainly fall under several of those buckets that the recommendations are divided up into. So teaching and learning, teacher pipeline, obviously, because special ed is a critical area, and also support beyond the classroom. And I think we will find, I hope to find through our community work that we're not going to come in and expect that every place in the state can or even wants to make movement on all 95 of those areas, but there will be some of those communities that point to that specific area and that want to really do some work and dive into that.
Any other questions? Ms. Ann?
I'm looking at your steering committee, a list in tiny little letters. Make them bigger. And it seems to be very heavy with large organizations. I see one teacher. I see one former superintendent. How did you select the members of your steering committee?
I don't know, that's a good question. That's before we started, so I'm not sure exactly how that was put together. Know that there was an effort to represent all the different stakeholder groups within the state and build some consensus around what needs to happen. We are working with all stakeholders in each community that want to be involved, and so we're planning on casting a big tent wherever we're working. So our goal is to be as inclusive as possible.
So if, for example, you don't have anybody who's a member of a public school board, that you might consider filling a slot with someone who has that kind of experience? That's just a question.
Right. I know that Jay Barth is on our implementation working group, and he's representing the state board. But as far as
I'm at a local school board.
Yeah. So, but we're happy to include everybody.
Thank you.
We also will help you bring together different resources, help you with different processes that you might want to go through, provide expertise and data for you. Just let us know. We'd love to help.
One more question.
Let me congratulate you on the audacity of your recommendations, and I'm serious about that. You certainly had an auspicious group on your steering committee. As you know, this group is tasked with making specific recommendations about the future of public education in South Pulaski County pretty quickly. So I don't mean to put you on the spot tonight, but certainly take this question home and sleep on it and get back to us if you want to. But we'd like to, any suggestions that you might have for taking your recommendations and applying them in this part of the world soon. And any help that you might have to offer, if you could detail that, and I'm sure somebody will take you up on it.
All right. And I mean, we appreciate that very much, and we just encourage you to really dream big. We know that poor students are just as smart as rich students, and that they can achieve the same things. So we think it's time. It's time to take some bold action. Thank you.
One other thing I'd like to add is to commend you on the emphasis on early childhood education before kindergarten. So important. Thank you.
Thank you. We plan to be working extensively on quality pre-K this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Mr. Jordan.
I was going to very quickly, before our colleagues from CRPE were going to present to you, I wanted to clarify a few things. I was not able to be here the last meeting, and although I was watching and did send a few comments in, I was going to ask him very quickly. I pulled up our website, Office of Innovation for Education. There was a question asked the last time about who is Office of Innovation for Education versus who is Office of Education Policy, OEP, that was here the last time presenting on discipline. And I wanted to give a more complete answer because we do some data, but that is not the focus of the work of our office. The focus of the work of our office is really to try and cultivate statewide more innovative education community that is really geared towards growing the possibilities for student-focused learning in Arkansas. And in doing that,
we're really focused on looking at what schools out there are doing that's different, and we don't pay attention to whether they are a charter school or a traditional school within a traditional district. And so in bringing in CRPE, part of that is the role that the Office of Innovation for Education is asked to have in the motion that started this stakeholder group was to help you all and the department find a researcher that could pull together data so you could make some really great recommendations, and hopefully do dream bold about that. In doing that, I have to rely on a small network of people who know more about charter district collaborations than I would, because that's not the focus of the work that we do. And so with that in mind, I mentioned the last time that I had, or not the last time, 2 meetings ago, that I had contacted CRPE because they are a group. When you Google charter district collaboration, or when you look at people who are working in this particular space, they're a group that comes to mind. And they show up very high on the list when you're doing that particular search. So they're here to talk with you, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you. But I wanted to kind of clarify where Office of Innovation is in the middle of this. We are really, I would say, trying to help you broker the services that you need to get the information that you need, and guiding that from, I don't know what Dr. Barth's motivation was in naming our office, but I do know that the work that we do, we're exposed to a lot of really neat things that are going on in other parts of the country, and then we also have some pretty seasoned researchers who really understand the nature of the work. And so I think we can help inform your process of selection, but that partway that starts by you all getting more informed by people who actually work within this space and know more about it. And so I will turn that over to you.
Well, good evening. My name is Jordan Pasamentier, and I'm sure we'll have a PowerPoint coming up. There it is. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll have Sean Gill introduce himself as well. I'm the Deputy Policy Director at the Center on Reinventing Public Education out of the University of Washington. We call ourselves CERPI for short. And my background is I'm an educator. I taught for a couple of years in New York, and then chose to become a lawyer after that, building a career to improve outcomes for children in various states. I worked for Lone Star Legal Aid in Texas for a while. I worked for the courts in California for a while, and then I moved up to Washington to join this Research and Policy Center so that I could have exposure district-wide from a research lens. And I've been doing it for since maybe 1999 up till now. And let me introduce Sean Gill.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm Sean Gill. I'm a research analyst at CERPI. Began my career at the State Auditor's Office in California and really got interested in education issues when we were asked to look at data collected around graduation dropout rates. And in the course of that study, it really does tell a sobering story in California, just like it does in many other states, about the achievement gap or the opportunity gap, particularly among African American and Latino students. So that really motivated me to sort of get more into education. I worked in education advocacy for a little bit, and then I came to CERPI because I was really motivated. We really wanted to figure out what works, particularly looking from a governance structure. And since I've joined CERPI for about 2 years, I've been working on district charter collaboration, personalized learning, and education finance.
Am I in charge of this thing? Oh, cool. Thank you. So here's what I'd like to share with you today. A little roadmap. We'll talk about CERPI to begin with, so you have a better sense of how we approach our research. We'll address your 6 policy areas of concern. Just to show you how we approach this kind of thinking, we've worked with a number of cities across the country, and we think there are some similar situations in Little Rock, south of the river, where we might be able to provide additional insight. And then, especially because I know this organization is interested in district charter collaboration, Sean will go over in detail what we know so far in general terms. And really, this is a getting to know you interaction. So as you have questions, comments, concerns, please share them, and we'll answer them to the best we can. And then lots of Q&A at the end. All right, so let's get started. All right, Center on Reinventing Public Education is about 25 years old now. It started by a guy named Paul Hill, who used to work for RAND, and he had this really important research in the Northeast, where he went to parochial schools and magnet schools, both of which were high performing, way higher than the traditional counterparts in the area. And he wanted to figure out, okay, what is similar? What is making these particular schools so successful? And what he found, which he wrote in this paper, The High Schools with Character, were that these schools were aligned around a common mission. They had flexibility within their walls to manage their schedule, their staff, their program design. They had very targeted resources, and importantly, they had very clear and high expectations for the students in the building. Importantly, they served a disproportionate number of low-income and minority students, and they were able to achieve remarkably high outcomes. The problem was that there were so few of them. And so this really starts the basic research agenda for SERPI. How do you get a system that produces more excellent schools over time? And that's pretty much the question that we use when researching all of what we research. These are some of the cities that we've worked with in various ways over the course of the time. You'll see the two circles. One is called Portfolio City, and the other is Compact City. And these are the cities that have had a compact between districts and charters. Portfolio is a term of art that we use to refer to a particular kind of problem-solving framework, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But you can see that they vary. You know, we have big metroplexes that we've talked to. We have very small suburbs that we speak with, and over a range of different issues. Sometimes it's focused on talent. Sometimes it's focused on funding issues. Sometimes it's focused on how do you get a diverse array of quality school options, and the list goes on. I encourage you to check out our website and just see the different kinds of research we have. I should say that the way our business model is, we don't take from student tuition. We run on philanthropic grants and federal grants. And you can see that we've kind of gone all over the country, which gives us a bird's eye view of some educational issues that are actually very city focused, which brings me to Little Rock. You were tasked with addressing these 6 policy areas of concern, providing recommendations on them in rapid pace. And I sort of summarized them here. Access, diverse population, funding and cost effectiveness. I understand that now that a DSEG order is over, that comes with a significant loss of funds. Demographics and enrollment patterns. I understand there's concern with students leaving the traditional public schools. Facilities, siting, and modernization. There's a need to improve facilities and make sure they're sited in a place that gives access to students who are historically disadvantaged. And then finally, district charter collaboration. We'll dig into 3 of these later on because I think they're important for this group. What we did, we tried to do some thinking on this back at the office. And it seems that with these 6 issues, you can kind of boil them down into these 4 problem areas. Not all students are achieving at high levels. That is the problem that gives rise to the policy area concern for which you must provide recommendations. Students are leaving for other options. There are declining funds, and there are resource challenges which involve facilities, human capital, expenses. But what's important to think about is that these challenges don't exist in isolation. They have a relationship, which, if you look, appears to be related in a vicious cycle. And this is something that we see across the country in different ways. And I think the challenge that this group has is how are you going to break that cycle? What recommendations are you going to provide that help break the cycle? Because you start with not all students achieving at high levels. And you'll find that some students will opt out. They'll go to a private school or a neighboring county through the choice mechanism. Or they'll switch to be homeschooled, and then the list goes on. Then funds will decline because funds attach to students in some fashion, and as the students leave, the funds go with them. And then finally, you have these resource challenges. If you don't have the funds to build new buildings, to modernize your buildings, and the cycle continues. So let's flip that around. How do you switch the first one where students aren't achieving at high levels and make that a goal statement. How do you achieve better outcomes? How do you get it so that all students are achieving at high levels? And I'll just walk you through what we call 3 theories of action. Theory of action is a fancy term that research folks use to say a problem-solving framework. It's a way of thinking through all these independent issues as integrated, as connected to one another. It's a way of thinking through strategically how you're going to achieve your goals. Often it's a bunch of if-then statements, but here's how I'll do it. I'll start with an approach that we'll refer to as centrally driven, and then I'll talk about a school-driven approach, and then finally a market-driven approach. And let me emphasize, these are models. These are very hard to find pure forms in reality, but I think just simplifying them should help let us talk through some of the different ways to think strategically about breaking that vicious cycle. So let's talk about centrally driven. When we start with centrally driven, we're thinking, who makes the decisions on the day-to-day? Who's in charge of the big stuff? And typically, in a centrally driven model, you're going to find central staff, central administration in a central office, usually of a district. Sometimes it's mayor's office, depending on where you're at. And how do they choose to make those, how do they implement those decisions? Well, they do it through uniformity, through making sure that all the schools have some sort of similar design and curriculum, calendar, staffing ratio. And then what happens if things aren't quite right in the system? How do they control the quality? Well, they add resources where it looks like resources are lacking, or if the outcomes in a particular place are lacking, well, maybe they'll add say a tutoring system or an after-school activity. But importantly, they don't diverge too much from the uniform administration of their design, schedule, and human capital. And of course, the same goal is present for centrally driven: better outcomes for students. If you want examples of this, they can be challenging to come up with, but Austin has been shifting towards centralization. Baltimore has been shifting somewhat towards centralization. Boston used to go towards centralization. Now it looks like they're swinging back in a different direction. But this is a viable way that some cities have approached their education. Market-driven's the next one. This one's even harder to find examples for. Sure.
Just so I'm working from a clear understanding, the centrally driven in these other areas, are there multiple districts, or are we talking about one district that kind of
right,
from the top down implements these type of changes?
One district from the top down implementing.
Okay.
Market-driven, this is sort of the flip side to centrally. This is where families are basically building out the system through their choice preferences. The way it's implemented are schools will compete to attract students to their buildings, and they do that in a number of ways. Sometimes it's just heavy campaigning. Other times it'll be tailoring their design in a way that's more attractive for some students over others. And the way you control quality there is, well, if you think a school isn't doing well, you won't enroll, and if enrollment's low enough, then that school will go belly up, and that's the end of that school. On the flip side, if a school's doing really well, then enrollment will be great, there'll be demand for it, and they'll be slated to expand and replicate. So essentially, it's the market driving the shape of the system. And the strategy here would lead to better outcomes for students. So says the strategy. The trouble is this, we can't really find real world examples. Detroit might be the closest one, but I hate to use them. They're in a state of flux lately, and I'm not quite sure it's fair to ascribe any sort of strategy to what's going on there at this time.
I must have missed something. You said it is hard to find examples.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say that private schools and charter schools are an example?
As a system, I'm hard-pressed to find that as an opportunity. So I can imagine there would be a city with private schools as an option, but to identify that as a strategy that the city has as a whole, that's hard to do.
Maybe not a conscious strategy, but nonetheless, some might really
Sure.
term it a strategy.
On a
It's
micro,
certainly
yeah.
a reality.
I take your point. On a micro level, an individual private school or an individual charter school might think in these terms, but this is a systems level strategy and it would be hard to find a broader scope for it.
No, you might want to hang around the South a little bit more. We got a lot of churches that could educate you to the fact that they actually do have
Sure.
a system. It's a smaller one, but I'm really trying to make sure that I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yes, and I understand that the private sector in Little Rock's also quite significant as well.
That's right, it is.
Yeah. The last one we have is school-driven, and this one sort of takes a little bit from market, a little bit from central. The idea is that the schools are really driving the day-to-day decisions in the system, and the way it's implemented are schools end up differentiating and responding to student need. If you're thinking about, well, what does central office do? Central office serves as a system of supports for those schools, and in terms of quality control, can serve as an oversight body so that a school that has differentiated in a way that is successful is identified and has the opportunity to expand and replicate. And if not successful, then it becomes limited and possibly eliminated. You see how this is different, though, from market, where market votes with your feet. A school-driven is much more performance-based, and of course, here the strategy is better outcomes for kids. There are a number, just to be very clear where SERPI's coming from a research agenda, from a learning agenda, this is the kind of strategy that SERPI looks for opportunities to research. Because it seems to be the one, and this is basically our hypothesis, it seems to be the one that best supports the prospect of adding more excellent schools to a system. Examples where this is taking place, Indianapolis, Denver, New Orleans, Cleveland has done this, and the list goes on. Any questions before we shift gears?
No question.
All right. So here we are, 6 policy areas of concern. Now, I want to look at 3 of these, and I want to do it through the lens of strategic thinking. And we can do it through serving a diverse population and funding and cost effectiveness, and then I'm going to give it over to Sean, and he'll go deep on district charter collaboration. And your help here would be great. What we did back at the office was sort of a bird's eye view, our best guess based on the information we had, how one might think through these for purposes of Little Rock south of the river. So thinking through meeting diverse student needs, and specifically I believe you were tasked to recommend on English language learners, students of different academic backgrounds, special education, including disabilities. So that's the policy area, meeting diverse student needs. If you're in a centrally...
I'm going to interrupt. The 3 theories, unless I misunderstood what you were saying, I kind of got the sense that the market-driven theory is not a favorite one.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yep. I was actually joking with Dr. Arola before we came out here that we get into Twitter fights with some folks at the University of Arkansas, as they tend to prefer more market-driven solutions.
What is your preferred solution?
So the school-driven one is the one that we think best supports a system of excellent schools.
Okay, that's what you mean. You said that's your hypothesis.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
And to be fair, like none of these works perfectly. We can tell you all sorts of challenges that school-driven runs into. One of the things that our research looks for is a way to analyze the sort of the preconditions that are overlooked that are necessary for the success of the system. We call those zones of wishful thinking. And and there are many. It's hard to get this right. So centrally driven. Let's see what happens when you apply a centrally driven strategy to address the policy area of meeting diverse student needs. Well, the idea here is, let me just make sure I've got the right thing. Yeah, I broke them down. Yeah, the idea here is you take ELL population, for example. Central office devises a program that they then administer fairly uniformly across all the ELL population in all the schools. That's the way Central does it. School-driven, you might find a school program, a school that designs itself around, say, I'm blanking on the word here. It's not bilingual education, essentially. That would be, one school does that, another school might think multiple languages like an international school, and that would be how the system addresses whether ELL is being met. And then you can see, as those schools differentiate, which ones are working, which ones are not, and expand and contract accordingly. And then market-driven, the idea is if there is demand, supply will come. And if you have enough students with ELL, then a supplier will come in to operate a school that is responsive to that demand. Now let's think through funding. This one can be a little wonkier, but I'll try not to go there. So funding and cost effectiveness, and Sean, feel free to chime. This is also Sean's area of expertise. So let's see, centrally driven. The way it normally works under a centrally driven strategy is central office will receive money from the state and from the federal government gives to the state that then gives to the local school district, and they distribute out based on a staffing formula or a set student-teacher ratio. And so basically the school gets people or positions rather than dollars. Under school-driven, the school gets more in terms of dollars, which they can then use in response to what their community is after. So if it looks like they need an extra physics teacher, or if they need an extra English teacher, well, the school is responsible for figuring that out, doing their own budget, and making the spending choices accordingly. On top of that, we know, and school-driven accepts that some students require additional resources to educate, and so you attach an additional number of dollars to each student that then goes to each school, which then the school will use to figure out what to do with. Market-driven, finally, this is more easily described as vouchers or ESAs. Essentially, a student has a ticket to ride in some form, which they can spend on educational opportunity as they wish. That's a set amount, and the idea here is the better learning opportunities will be spent on, the worse opportunities will be walked away from. And that's the way to think strategically through 2 of the 6 policy areas of concern. Again, very simplified. It's much more complicated than what 2 PowerPoint slideshows will do for you. But it's a way that SERPI generally approaches these topic areas. And I guess I should add, we're not the only game in town. There are other organizations that focus on, say, funding, and we are happy to serve as a resource for you if it seems like you need to tap into those expertise as well, or in addition, or instead of. I mean, after all, we are a university research and policy center. Our goal is to improve outcomes for students, and if it looks like we can do that better by connecting you to, say, Edunomics, then please don't hesitate to suggest that, and we'll help you make that connection. All right, now collaboration. Sean's got the floor.
Thank you, Jordan. So we just wanted to kind of flip our thinking a little bit, and just on this slide, we're pointing out that district charter collaboration actually could exist in all 3 of these theories. So I wanted to take a slightly different slice of it. But I wanted to start by going back to the map and just pointing out that there have been formalized collaboration efforts in 25 cities now. 23 of those are in green on the map. They had compacts that were sort of sponsored or sort of initiated by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So all of those green cities received a planning grant, and then a couple of them received additional funds from the foundation to do some of the collaborative work. Duval County, which is Jacksonville, and Miami-Dade in Florida, interestingly enough, have formalized collaboration efforts that was really a competitive grant process started by the State Department of Education in Florida. And so we have partnerships with both the foundation and the State Department of Education in Florida to look at how district collaboration has worked in these cities. But we also look at how collaboration has worked in some of the other cities that SERPI is familiar with.
Quick question.
Yes.
I don't know Spring Branch and
Oh, yes.
Aldine. How large are they?
Spring Branch, I apologize. I should have put that those are districts that serve Houston or some of the outlying areas of Houston. So it's not the city of Spring Branch, Texas, but it serves sort of the western suburbs of Houston. Aldine is sort of the north And then Grand Prairie is a small district that's near Dallas.
How small?
I am forgetting, unfortunately, the numbers, but I believe it's probably, I would guess no more than 20,000.
But you dealt with it separately from Dallas ISD?
Right.
And the same thing with Spring Branch and Albany?
Correct,
instead of
yeah.
Houston ISD?
Yeah, those agreements were really, sometimes we use the term cities, but these agreements really do tend to be with a district, an independent school district, or unified districts. Franklin McKinley is a union elementary school district in San Jose. So the agreement really related to that school district and the charter schools that may have existed in that district. Some were authorized by that district, some were not authorized by that
Right. Having lived all over the country and actually several of those cities, we're kind of small potatoes compared to most of them.
Well, I think, Spring Branch, Aldine, I think Central Falls is a very small district near, outside Providence. Everything's outside of Providence in Rhode Island. So it definitely, it definitely can work in large cities, and I would say suburbs or smaller cities as well.
Okay, really curious. Thank you.
All right, so I just wanted to kind of walk through, again, our theory of change with collaboration. This is if it works well, and I think if you look at our research, we would be the first to point out it doesn't always work. So we're always thinking about what are recommendations that could potentially make it work better. But the big idea is that this should lead to shared resources and responsibilities. So for school districts, they're going to gain a partner that will actually help them ensure there's high quality schools in every neighborhood. They can maybe tap into some charter CMOs, some of the networks have very good talent pipelines now in professional development, so they could tap into some of that expertise. If there's innovation in terms of serving a particular group of students, a particular neighborhood, they could work together on that. And again, they would have some of the exposure to charter expertise from other areas, because some of the charter networks, of course, like KIPP or Yes Prep, are in a number of cities now. And for charter schools, there's ideally some benefits too. They're going to get access to ideally facilities, funding, and sort of access to families in terms of making their options available to them through enrollment fairs or through other opportunities to present their options to students. Those are some of the biggest barriers that charter advocates are usually going to identify. It can reduce political tensions, so sometimes just getting district and charter folks together in a room, it helps them realize that they often have similar goals or trying to do similar things, serving similar students. They get exposure to district expertise. I'll talk a little bit about this, but special education is one area where we see charter schools benefiting from district expertise. And then when we do talk to a lot of charter leaders, charter founders, they really do see their school as being, as having a broader impact than just the students they touch. And they really are interested in having a reach and impact beyond just their campus or the students that they're serving.
Sean, if you can go back to the last slide, I think one of the issues in our city, the reason why this is needed is because a lot of people think that, and this is my perception, this may be incorrect, but my perception, that a lot of people think that there is a assumption that a charter school is a higher quality school. Mm-hmm. And based on your slide, that seems to be the implication as well, that like, if you work with a charter, that's better for you because going in, everyone knows charters are better.
Better for the
higher quality. I mean, you saying the school districts, their benefit is they get a high quality school, which to me implies they're a lower quality school and they need the charter schools to be a high quality school. So that's like the baseline. And I want to know.
I certainly respect that point. And I think if you look at some of our research and other research like Credo, there definitely is a huge variation in quality in charters. And actually part of the Florida work was designed to sort of improve the authorizing practices of those districts so they could actually hold charter schools accountable and improve quality. So I definitely respect your point, and I think that's why on the next slide we had sort of put exposure to district expertise as well. SERP's recommendation on charter schools is it's flexibility with accountability, and so you need to be holding those charter schools accountable. And when they don't work, you need to intervene. And so district charter collaboration can touch upon that in terms of finding ways to help struggling charter schools, or maybe coming together and saying, we're going to have a common accountability framework in our city, and when charter schools don't meet that, or traditional public schools don't meet that, then there will be interventions after that.
I got a question. When you say the high quality schools and charters and different, you're talking about Florida. What about Little Rock? Because you're talking about other states in high quality for charters, but what about right here in the state or Little Rock exactly?
Unfortunately, I haven't studied Little Rock's charter schools in depth at the moment, but that is something certainly. One of the goals of many of these grants is to sort of find a way to bring high quality charter schools in, or kind of spur applications that would lead to higher quality. So if that's a concern, that is something that could be done through district charter collaboration.
You're describing for us what I call a partnership pathway. One thing I'd like to know, when you get these people in the room, what facilitation techniques do you use? Are you an advocate of everyday democracy methodologies? Are you an advocate of study circles methodology? This is a very unique, in many ways, community that's really ticked off at a lot of things.
Let me just hold on to that question, and I just want to talk a little bit about what they have collaborated on, then we can come back to that.
Okay, that's fine.
So lastly, we wanted to end on sort of this idea that, ideally the point of district charter collaboration isn't to make lives easier for charters or lives easier for districts. It's actually to benefit the community. So ideally there's going to be, through collaboration, there'll be high quality options available for students. You'll have improved services for English language learners and special education students. Then parents will have better access to information about the schools in their community, and you'll also have systems to hold all the schools in the community accountable. So these are some of the common areas that we see districts and charters collaborating on. And we sort of put them on this chart to show that there can be efforts that require a lot of effort. We're using effort pretty broadly to mean it's both resources and dollars, but also time spent. And then some have a higher benefit and a lower benefit. The ones that I've highlighted, I think, are ones that are potentially interesting to Little Rock. Equity reports is sort of this idea that charter schools and district schools are going to present information about discipline, suspensions, and expulsions using common standard format. And so it doesn't require a whole lot of effort. It just requires the groups getting together, kind of talking about, well, what is the standard definition for suspension? Are we talking in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension? And SERPI has done some research that shows in DC and New Orleans, the two sectors came together. And just by having that information, you've started to see people responding to that. And so a school that had charter schools that had some high expulsion rates said, oh, we've got to do something about that. And they start to do something about that. Doesn't require a huge amount of effort, but we actually see a pretty good benefit from that. Special education services, I'll go back to Central Falls, Rhode Island. There's a well-known, pretty good charter school called Blackstone Valley Prep. It was known for doing good things with students, low-income students, but it wasn't known for doing special education particularly well. And so what they did is they worked with the superintendent of that school district, and they actually sort of purchased the time or leased the time. They came to an agreement to sort of borrow one of their special education administrators. And so she worked at that school to help them improve their assessment, their enrollment, sort of the development of the IEP process, so that parents could have confidence that when they went to that school and they were a child with special needs, that they would be getting similar level of services to a district school. And that helped ensure that that was providing an equitable option for all students. Common accountability, Chicago. We know Chicago is, you hear about the education debates there, they're pretty intense. But the charter schools and the Chicago Public Schools Traditional District, which is the authorizer of most of the schools there, they actually came together and developed a common accountability framework. We'll have a paper that's coming out in a couple of weeks, I believe, that will kind of give a case study of this. But it really required a lot of community input. They wanted it to be, if we're holding charter schools accountable, we're holding Chicago Public Schools accountable. They've had to close a lot of schools just because of enrollment declines. We want to have a common way to do that, and we want the community to be involved. And so they had a process by which they identified data that could go into that common accountability framework and identified what would happen when you meet certain thresholds. When would it be time to revoke the charter or put the charter in probation, or what would be the similar intervention that we would do at the Chicago Public Schools? Common enrollment is getting right at the heart of making sure that it's not a burden to families to have to navigate 100 different options. They have one system, one portal to go to. And again, New Orleans and DC are sort of at the forefront of this. DC is not a compact city, but it is an interesting place to look at because the traditional district is pretty much run from a more central model, but they do also have a high market share of charters. So it was a way to sort of bring all of those players in. It's one central application. Again, we tend to think those things require a lot of effort, but they also have a huge benefit in terms of making sure that there's high quality schools and all families have access to them. Yes.
With the equity reports, I think what you mentioned was great about the discipline data, where there's some consistency among the traditional schools and public charter schools. Mm-hmm. Is there already a framework for that, or is that something you get these people in a room and then they have to work through, or is there existing, like, okay, if you agree to this, these are the rules?
Yeah, I think, I know Chicago's been working a little bit. I think they sometimes start off of the district, sort of what's the district discipline handbook, and they sort of work from there. I'm afraid I don't recall exactly what DC did, but I can certainly make sure the report gets to you.
I can speak a little bit of that. The idea of an equity report's new, and DC's and New Orleans are slightly different from each other, but they do kind of serve as a framework. There are at least 2 other cities that are sort of going down this route because they like the idea. So if that's something you're interested in, we put you in touch with those cities. We show you the frameworks they have. We just essentially serve as a connector so you can see what's already been done.
Okay. One other question, something you mentioned. I think a lot of these cities, and I hadn't memorized all of them, but my understanding, Arkansas is a little different with the authorizer being the state as opposed to the local entities. How does that impact your perception of proposed collaboration?
We actually see collaboration in both types of situations. Okay. So Boston is a city where the state is the authorizer. I think in Spokane, that again, the state is the authorizer, but it's a city like Tulsa. Tulsa is the authorizer directly. The Tulsa School Board is the authorizer of charter schools. In Florida, there is no statewide authorizer, so it's the county school boards that's the authorizer. So we see it working across. I think the thing to think about when you're thinking about collaboration is it does sort of change the relationship on. In DC is a good example. The traditional public school system, GCPS, is not the authorizer, the separate board. So they're sort of working more as, it's a finding way for them to come together. When you have the district as the authorizer, it does change the conversation a little bit because the person, you're asking them to sort of step beyond that authorizer relationship. You're actually asking them to collaborate with different departments in the district office. So I think that's actually, if I'm talking myself around to it, I think that's probably the biggest change. Is sometimes we see when the district's the authorizer, all of the collaboration work tends to go through the authorizing office or the Office of Charter Schools, when really it's about, well, if we want to collaborate on facilities or transportation or special ed, we have to get those other departments involved in the collaboration. All right, so we are working in the process of we've published an interim report that came out 2 years ago, and we're sort of taking a look at the last 4 years of this work. And I just wanted to highlight some of the conditions that we think support success for successful collaborations. And so, we feel that in order for it to work, the cities are kind of showing us that there has to be stake in the game. The districts that have successful collaboration really have a long-term philosophy in the role of charters in their city. And they sort of have basically accepted the fact that charters are going to be an option. They'll be part of, sometimes it's called a portfolio, a menu of options for students. But at the same time, charters have to really understand and think a little bit beyond their campus and say, we actually have an interest in the district or the overall city's success in education. And in order for us to really be serving our mission, we have to be working with other schools. we think there's definitely, it definitely helps when other players take an interest, so such as your group, the State Board of Education, when states can kind of play a political and regulatory roles. Florida is sort of piloting this to see how can the state provide some support for district charter collaboration. There has to be broad community ownership, and that's really an opportunity for local leaders who maybe aren't even involved in the education system to sort of say, and in Boston we see this, the mayor has been part of the compact there. And lastly, this sort of gets to the question we had about, well, how do you actually make it work? Well, when you get people in the room, how do you actually get them talking together? And we find that a lot of the cities, Boston is one, Cleveland is another, they really have an independent coordinator, project manager, who is, may technically be employed by the district might have their employment or independent services contract, but that person is not necessarily a full-time employee. And that person kind of serves, not to say like what you should be collaborating about, what are our priorities, but sort of helps keep track and sort of can help facilitate that process. And so, the specific model that they might be using, I'm not sure. There tends to be in cities a steering committee. Cleveland is a more recent compact where they've created an executive committee. I believe they have 4 to 6 folks that come from the Cleveland Municipal School District, and then they also have 4 to 6 folks that come from the charter sector, different charter schools. And then they further broken it down and they've established subcommittees, and they require every charter school that's part of the compact has to participate in at least one subcommittee. And so those subcommittees are now tasked, and again, they're sort of at the beginning stages. So they're supposed to look at, well, what can we do on special education? What would that look like? And then what would the district be able to provide? What would the charter school people be able to provide? And so they're working through that right now. So that executive committee, steering committee concept tends to help. And lastly, we think the agreements that have tended to be pretty successful have had tangible outcomes. Chicago really did do a good job of identifying sort of tangible timelines, tangible outcomes. This accountability framework I mentioned was one they hit. They were also going to do common enrollment. They unfortunately didn't hit that one, but there's a real understanding of what they were striving to. It wasn't about just getting people in a room and saying, we're going to, play nice or make nice. We're actually going to try to work towards a common goal. So go ahead.
May I ask you, when did that occur in Chicago?
Gosh, Chicago was one of the initial compact cities, so I think the compact would have been formed around 2012, I believe. I can look into that.
And what do your follow-up surveys or assessments or studies show about the longevity of that initial apparently positive outcome?
I think Chicago, actually, because they've had an agreement that sort of identifies what they're working towards, they also have the benefit of a charter sector that has a strong network leader, or who kind of represents the charter schools. They've seen a lot of leadership turnover in the school district itself, but a lot of the collaborative agreements, the common framework is still being used. They work together on funding issues, which actually benefited the traditional public schools a lot. I was there on another project talking to principals who have budget autonomy, and they like using that. They can kind of figure out what they want to staff. So a lot of those things that Chicago achieved, I believe, are still being used and are still being acted upon.
Is it your practice to follow up on all of these places where you've been consultants?
Yeah, we try to do, at one point we're trying to do quarterly check-ins. I don't know if we'll be tracking all 25 cities as closely, but we do try to check in with both district and charter folks as they go along.
Do you publish your findings?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let me run through this slide, and then I'll point you to our resources. So again, this is sort of just a basic framework. I don't think it's going to be revolutionary or breaking the box, but just if you're thinking about how collaboration could help Little Rock, I think the first step that folks need to do is they need to assess. They need to say, what are the relative strengths of district schools? What are relative strengths of charter schools? What are the most pressing needs of district schools? And what are the most pressing needs of charter schools? From there, you kind of have a baseline to figure out, well, if we were to consider collaboration, if charter schools are struggling with special education, would it be possible for the district to share some of its expertise, or are there services for particularly high needs students that could also be used by charter schools, reducing the cost for all? Would it be possible to improve access by having a common enrollment system, or even more basic than that, having an enrollment fair that just makes sure that everyone's aware of the options that are available to them, and charters aren't just for a subset or a particular neighborhood? Another thing is to think about, well, is there really desire to share expertise and learn from each other? So some of the collaborations we see are, the district and charter schools are trying to take things on together. When the started Common Core implementation was a big focus of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so a number of the cities actually talked about, well, how could we get our teachers together? And some of the teachers met together to talk about their challenges in implementing Common Core. And lastly, is there a desire to tackle big problems together? And this could be, maybe we don't know how to serve particular students with particular language very well, or maybe we're still trying to figure out how to do personalized learning or use of technology in schools. Are those things that we could sort of do together? And then lastly, you want to define. You want to make sure you have sort of a sense, like I was talking about before, how would collaboration be formalized? Would there be a stakeholder group? Would there be some kind of compact document that is published and sort of signed on by all the charters and other leaders? Who would participate? We see some cities, like Central Falls, a lot of their collaborations were kind of with particular charters, and that seemed to work for them. One charter had the issue with special education, they worked together. Another charter maybe had an issue with transportation, they worked together. That can work for some cities. Other cities has taken a broader approach and said, no, we want this to really encapsulate the entire sector. So that does require more work because there's a lot more voices then in those types of agreements. And then lastly, just making sure we have, what are the measures of success and who tracks this? Is this something that a school board is going to be tracking? Is this something that another group will be tracking? Is this something that the state has a role in tracking? Go ahead. Do we have a question?
I can save it until you're
finished. So I'll just, and I know I've talked a lot. So we have been publishing kind of as we go, sort of city by city summaries on our website, which is crpe.org. And we have a newsletter that's available then, so we'll be continuing to publish updates as we continue this work. We have done some papers on co-location. That's something that I can talk a little bit more about. That's where a charter school actually is on the same campus as a district school. Boundary spanners are sort of folks that cross over from one sector to work for another. And we just published one recently sort of talking about what are the different interests. A large charter network is going to have different needs and interests than maybe a small independent charter school. And we're thinking ahead, we're thinking as we continue to track these cities, we'll be looking at what are constraints and opportunities on facilities. Again, as I mentioned, what can the states do? Is there a way for leaders to help manage the politics? And then lastly, we get a lot of questions about knowledge sharing. How do we get teachers together? How are they sharing best practices? We haven't seen a whole lot of success there, but we want to really dive in and sort of figure out what makes those knowledge sharing efforts succeed or fail. And then I just wanted to mention, we have a number of other resources on SERPE's website that might be interesting to you guys. One is Measuring Up, that looked at educational improvement in 50 cities. Another one was how parents experience public school choice. We've taken a look at public engagement in Baton Rouge, and coming next week on our blog, we'll start to reveal some of our findings from our fieldwork on personalized learning implementation. So that's sort of the formal end of our presentation, but Jordan and I are happy to take any questions that you have.
Ms. Verdi.
Thank you. So, having come to Little Rock, I think one of the questions that we sort of discussed, and one of the things that I think I'm concerned about is why families are choosing to leave the district, and whether or not there are reasons outside of academic achievement that are driving those choices. And so as a researcher, how would you go about kind of getting at those answers that are beyond just achievement and charter and district collaboration, but some issues that I think probably go back 50 years or more in this city that are driving those kinds of choices, and help us address that as a community.
Well, one of the easiest ways to figure out what's happening with parents is to ask them. And we have done parent surveys and recently did parent focus groups in Camden, New Jersey, as they're having a high choice environment to figure out how is it they're navigating, why are they making the choices they're making. But on top of a parent survey, we want to overlay a number of other things. First is just figuring out where people are choicing to and from, and then track that against the whole population, then break that down into subgroups and figure out are there reasons exogenous to education that are playing a role, what's going on in the city generally, try to get out of the education box and think about other factors that might be involved. Basically, there's no one right way to do this, but there are a lot of different factors to take into account when trying to draw some sort of finding from it.
And that kind of piggybacks to my question. We have developed a list of research questions that we think needs to be answered before we can make our recommendations. Mm-hmm. And just to be straightforward about it, those questions you could answer for us.
Yeah, I think I saw the questions, and a number of them I know we're able to answer, and I think some of them we can't because of the way we just are limited on the kind of data. So I think it was an interesting question asked by the group having to do with the migratory patterns, basically where are students choicing to and from, right? The trouble is if they choice out of the public sector, that is no longer a public record that we can trace and find. You know, you go down to student level data and there's only so much that you can follow. So you can't tell once they're out of the public schools whether they have moved away from the city or if they've become homeschooled or private schooled. So there's a big blank spot that it's hard to provide 100% accurate picture of what's happening. I mean, you can look at some of the data down to the student level to figure out, okay, are they choicing between Little Rock and North Little Rock, or Pulaski and private school, but it eventually becomes incomplete because you don't have full access to where every student goes.
So the questions that we have developed, is it possible for you to give us something that says we can do this, we
Sure.
can't do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Next. A lot of the stuff that y'all have been talking about, and Jordan, you just alluded to it in your previous answer, is inside baseball stuff. It's, you know, the only tool you have is a hammer. Every problem looks like a nail. And so one of the things that I keep asking about is the impact of these decisions on the community and the impact of things that happen in the community on the schools. So if you've got a school with low attendance in a neighborhood and you close that school, what does it do to the neighborhood? Conversely, if you open up a new school in an area and it causes a massive traffic jam because we have to transport everybody every place, what's the impact on the community? What's the impact on the community of specialized schools that require massive transportation? And what's the impact of that on different economic segments in society? Is there any group anywhere that looks at those kind of community impacts from these kind of decisions that we're talking about from a research standpoint?
Each one of those issues, there's research on. So, for example, school closures, and I'm blanking on who publishes on school closures. I know we've done case studies that involve cities that have school closures, and there's a group I know out of New York City that followed New York City school closures to figure out what the impacts were there. But you also mentioned transportation and another thing, and those are, I don't know one single group that does it all. So thinking about which impacts you want to investigate, then letting us know, and we can we could help you connect to, say, the folks who are doing school closure. But it's hard to bundle all that into one research shop.
Okay. One other question. I'm intrigued. You talked about compacts in terms of a charter school district collaboration, but I'm intrigued about this whole portfolio city concept. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So the portfolio strategy is what our founder Paul Hill coined as a problem-solving framework that he thinks best supports that development of system of excellent schools over time. We have a portfolio network, which are a set of cities that are interested in or applying some variation of the portfolio strategy. And I think there's right now maybe over 40 different school systems that are interested in looking in to that strategy. And essentially what this strategy is, it starts from a position of uncertainty. It says, we don't know what the best way is to educate every child in a system. And we happen to know that some children thrive in some learning environments and others don't. So given that uncertainty, the best we can do is differentiate schooling options and allow children to select in to the schools that are the best match for their particular learning preferences. So putting those things together, you get some form of matching or choice, and you get some form of school autonomy or school differentiation. And then the backstop against that is to figure out, oh, well, children are thriving in this school. Let's expand it and replicate it. Or children are not thriving in this school. It's not a good fit. Let's limit it or eliminate it. And those three things together, choice with autonomy and accountability, are sort of the keystone elements underlying a portfolio strategy. But there's a lot that can go wrong with just those three. There's a lot of investigation. I mentioned zones of wishful thinking. Well, there are basically these 4 additional areas where if you don't put a lot of investment and thought, the 3 keystones are for naught. There's not a point to them. And that means, I'll go through the 4 real quick. Preeminent, most important is talent. You need to have the finest people working in a school system who are suited to the schools in which they teach. And that also means central office needs to understand that schools are driving this change, and what supports can central office provide, which relationships can central office broker, and are they going to actually do the hard work of holding those schools accountable when the time comes. That's talent. Sources of support is the next one, and that simply is schools can't do it alone. They need to form partnerships, networks. They need to figure out how to tap the markets that provide all the additional schooling options that children need beyond the school alone. Funding, and we mentioned funding a little bit. In order for a school to differentiate and make choices for within their building, they need to be able to receive funds that they can then manage on their own to make those choices. And we call that per pupil funding. Where am I? Am I 3 here? I got one more. Public engagement, and this is the element that permeates the other 6. Because when you're going through a strategy, any strategy, but especially the portfolio strategy, it's not just an administrative action, it's a political action. And it requires a constant relationship with all the stakeholders, with all the beneficiaries from all the different parts of the system in the city. If you don't get public engagement right, it doesn't matter how great your strategy is, doesn't matter how awesome you think your schools are, you're sunk. So public engagement is sort of the linchpin, final 7th element of the portfolio strategy. And that's it.
Okay. Ms. Faird.
So some of the school districts that have embarked upon district-wide or city-wide reform efforts that have been held up as models, like, say, for instance, New Orleans, had kind of a rocky start, particularly for special education students. And that's my primary area of interest because I have a child with a disability. So would you have, and so for people who don't know, there was a class action lawsuit because students who were coming into the district after Katrina and returning back home didn't have a home school that would enroll them because they had high high and rather intensive support needs. So do you have any, as we embark upon making recommendations for this really diverse, really complicated region of the state, for reforming sort of our overall vision for education, do you have any notes of caution from cities that had tried this and then there have been these hiccups along the way, like what happened in New Orleans around, high expulsion rates for students from minority populations and then for special education students who were returning and were turned away from schools? I mean, any thoughts for us moving forward that would help us inform our decisions on choosing a researcher? And
so many red flags. Do you want to do
Gosh, I think you've highlighted special education as one, and New Orleans, I think they've realized that they sort of have to have, I would describe it as a regulatory framework, and so that means holding schools accountable.
Can you use the mic?
To repeat, I think you need to have some kind of regulatory framework, which is sometimes where folks, we use the term market-based, where they get a little worried if they're thinking about market-based. But sort of our view is that schools really can lead the change, but there has to be some sort of oversight. One thing that just comes to mind again from the district charter context is Denver, where they are both a portfolio city and have district charter collaboration compact, and where they actually, they had some specialized centers for students with maybe particularly intensive needs, and they actually decided to sort of contract with charter operators to operate some of those centers, so that the burden, not the burden, but the opportunity to serve special education students was shared by not just district schools. And so district students who were maybe at a district school and they went through the IEP process and realized they're going to need a more intensive level of support that can't be provided at the neighborhood school, they could actually be referred to one of those centers that was operated by a charter, and vice versa. The charter students could go to some of the district centers. And I've seen some research that's actually worked pretty well. So it's kind of an innovation that works. But I think with New Orleans, to go back to that, they've sort of, and they're still sort of figuring it out, because they're going to be going back to having the majority of the city under the Orleans Parish School Board rather than the Recovery District. But the Recovery District, I think, has developed some ways of being. One is just by publishing the data and being accountable, but also stepping in and to use a different example, student discipline. There's a process by which student discipline problems, if there's an expulsion or a suspension, that has to be reviewed by the central office. And so for a lot of charters who maybe started in 1992, that's like crazy. That's stepping on independence. But most of the charters there, I think, have realized, and this would be similar in DC probably as well, that in order for the city to have a good school system, we have to make sure that there's a school, there should be more than one option for every student, and that's going to require some level of oversight, not just necessarily of decisions in the aggregate, but it is going to sometimes require oversight of particular decisions. And so we are starting, I think, to see that even with districts that are maybe giving more autonomy to schools, there's also a process by which they can review certain decisions, especially around those questions of equity and access.
Thank you.
I actually got advice from a fellow who used to work at Lawrence, Massachusetts. This is much more general, but he was warning another city who was about to embark on this sort of thing. Make sure you figure out what counts as a win, and don't wait too long for that thing to happen. Look for where the flowers grow. I know it's a little fruity, but that was one of his, and it was really good. And this was important. There has to be you're gonna have to start to trust each other. From a bird's eye view, Little Rock looks like it's fighting a lot, and it's going to be important that when you sit down to talk terms, that you trust that the other side has something worthwhile and valuable to offer.
That leads me to a question I have about trusting each other. I think you're right that there are some trust issues. And that was one of my concerns I expressed at our previous meeting about your organization, in the sense that I think sections of the community will see SERPE as a charter-friendly organization. So there's an immediate distrust. There's immediate, like, I ain't feeling them, you know. So I want to know your response to that from as an organization. Like, when you come in behind the 8 ball, which if you came here you would be to some people, what's your response to that?
We often are met with distrust when we come into a city, and we get flack from both sides. I guess it might help to see SERPE's reputation in the country as sort of the critical friend. We've been in some cities called the district apologist, because we interact and work with the district and try to figure out how to build an excellent schools with the district. We are called charter advocates when we talk to charter schools and figure out, okay, how do charter schools play their role in building a system of excellent schools? We don't pick sides, but we really do a hard job of being respectful and honest and clear about telling both sides of the story. And I think when you peruse our work, yeah.
I was going to interrupt you there. I think that answer brings some of the distrust. So
Okay.
district apologist implies that the district need to apologize
that's
for
just what they're
something.
calling us.
Charter advocates means there's something to advocate for.
Right.
So there's a implicit gap
Yeah.
every time, and I think that's problematic for people who live here.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I'm just telling you what they're calling us.
Right? No, I know, and I'm just saying, if that's the narrative.
So I tell you, the best thing that breaks down the barrier is we actually come and talk to people. Once you see that we're just interested to take the evidence where it goes and to publish objective findings, it becomes a lot more comfortable, I think, to be in the room and talk things over. For example, we just did that in Camden, talk with focus groups, and I think there's a reluctance, to begin, because I've worked in a number of different states, and I know how it feels starting out as an outsider. You got to do a lot of legwork to become, familiar and comfortable with folks who aren't used to you. But that's usually what SERPE does, and I can tell you in the office that, I don't know, for what it's worth, these are awfully pleasant people that we work with, very effusive, family-oriented. They're not threatening at all, and they certainly don't look like they've got an agenda.
I'll make a comment, and then I have one more question. I think people in general have this is going to be part of my life goal, is that people in general, it doesn't matter what they're saying, it matters who's saying it. Now, I have a problem with that. I get this example all the time. If someone's a murderer and then they tell you don't steal, stealing is still bad. It doesn't matter that a murderer told you that. So it shouldn't matter who says things. But that's not the reality. People see who's saying it. And I think that's a challenge if you come here, regardless of how nice everyone is, and I bet y'all nice, that's going to be a challenge. So I'm just stating that from what I understand from the people who live in this city.
I appreciate that.
My question would be, logistically, because someone asked me today, what's the timeline? So if say we got started today, how long would it take for you to complete the task and provide something back for us so we can finally make our recommendations?
I suppose that depends on what you need from a group like SERPE. If it's going to be just crunching numbers, sort of along the lines of some of the questions you asked, well, that's just a matter of several of us sitting down and going through and getting, because we don't know how long it'll take to get student level data from the state, which is where you got to get it from, or it'll be maybe it's a matter of sitting down in a room a number of times. It's hard to tell, and I know you guys have a due date in December, and that's ambitious, I think, at this point.
Well, not
necessarily.
Not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that we recognize that was ambitious too. So.
Okay. But a timeline's something to talk about. Yeah, it's hard for me to say without knowing more.
Okay.
Do you have another?
Dr. Errol.
Is that too long? I'm thinking maybe part of what we need to figure out timeline is that set of questions that we have and their reflection on what is doable in terms of where we actually could get data. And what we could delineate in that list is what are existing data, and that's something that our office can help with because we do work with so much data, and what's data that would need to be collected, and then what's data that can't be collected for reasons just as you mentioned. And then there might also be other things going on that are already addressing that. It's my understanding, and I believe Dr. Ritter mentioned this when he was here a couple of weeks ago, that they had been doing a study of people, the movement within Little Rock. So some of that work might already be underway in some form, and that could actually assist the timeline. So it may be helpful to start with that kind of here's our list of questions, here's what you all believe are the things that you could answer with these types of data. This is what we might need to collect, and this is what is outside the collectible given the current state of data. Does that make sense?
That was exactly what I was going to ask, because it seems that, and I want to be sure and tell you that I've read so much on your website. I know you're nice guys. When you write an article that's herding cats, managing diverse charter school interests and collaboration efforts, are you the Sean Gill who's got onto that one? And I really love Robin Lake's new research confirms everything we already believe. So you guys have a sense of humor, which is always important. We understood that we were looking for a researcher or researchers that would answer a certain set of questions for us. Instead, what I believe I have heard, or maybe in addition to that, is that you all are really advocating an approach, a process that's very that has to be long-term. It's not a quick in, quick out. And people have to see what's in it for them, which means that they have to, what concerns me and what we have been through for decades here in Little Rock, we've been here before, primarily with a very long-running desegregation case that we asked everybody to buy into. And everybody's been hurt by part of the explosions and implosions. So we've, in a sense, been here before. We are fortunate that we do have a lot of resident expertise as far as the partnership pathway, facilitating consensus and collaboration. So we're not bereft of some talent. And there is something to be said for someone coming with new eyes from outside. But at the same time, we have become, as a community, a little leery of foreigners. But it doesn't mean that you don't have a lot of value to offer us. But I'm a little confused are we, as to the sequencing. I think it's going to be very important for you to become familiar with our post questions. Tell us what you think you can do and how long you think it would take you to do it. And then that also enables us to be looking at the bigger picture and the longer term about process and approach. But I want you to know I enjoyed reading your articles.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Jordan, it's taken us 3 months to learn how to pronounce Dr. Arola's last name, so you'll have to be a little patient with us.
I was warned. Yeah, that's good.
And I just want to make sure I have an understanding. We're talking about the timeline as a perspective, but I get the sense that we're also talking like this is a done deal. Like, am I missing? Did I miss something? I mean, I don't know if that's for you or to my board members, whoever can respond, but I kind of get the sense like, okay, let's get to work. But I don't know if are we there yet?
If that's what it sounded like I said, I didn't mean for it to. I think that in order to assess how much further we would be able to go with them and how far they might be able to go with us, you need to go and see if it's really a job you would even want to apply for. And then we would see if we really wanted to hire you. That's kind of boiling it down,
I think we're
from my point of view.
I think we're eye to eye.
Okay.
I think that's how we would proceed. We'd figure out, how long does it take to actually generate good answers on the questions you posed, whether we can do it. And it sounds like there might be others who might be able to take on some of those, which would accelerate our timeline, lower our bottom line. But I think the next thing that this group probably needs from SERPI is some sort of an account of time and scope, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just for information these other cities, were there other, obviously they're probably in the Little Rock Public Education Stakeholder Group in Boston, but did they have other bodies like us that initiated this process, or what was the, we don't need to go through every city, but are there other entities like us, or or did one side push this as opposed to the other side?
Oh. District charter. Yeah.
I think with the district charter work, I mean, I think, it was a grant opportunity that a lot of cities looked at initially from the Gates Foundation, and so that sort of spurred interest in that. That led to people sort of saying, "Hey, is this something we want to try to do?" And so that's how they got a planning grant to do it. But I don't think it was. I don't think it was necessarily all the charters were on board, or this is really a district initiative for at least some of the district charter collaboration work that we've looked at.
Yeah. And SERPI's invited to various cities or suburbs or towns by any number of kind of entities. I know there's one that's interested in district charter collaboration that's being driven by the charter side. I know that in another area, it's the cabinet level staff of central office that invited us and are interested in learning more. So it really, it kind of bubbles up organically, and we always take a call. So.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda, consideration of the additional requested information items. We requested some things from last meeting, and just for your review.
Yeah, I requested the improvement plan, which was sent to us, so I appreciate that. I think I may need to talk to someone to make sure I understand it all. I read it. I don't know if there's a person, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but I'm just saying I read the information, and it seemed there was a lot of moving parts in the Ms. Barnes. So maybe not tonight. I'm not asking questions tonight, but I appreciate it, and maybe at a different time we can kind of.
Mr. Poor, okay, next time.
Okay, maybe next time we can kind of go through some of that.
Yeah.
Specific questions.
Cool. Yeah.
So I just want to recognize that that request was answered, so I appreciate it.
Any other concerns, questions? We're going to go to the next item, agenda for next meeting. If you look down, we got community listening forums. That's something we talked about as far as those were dates that were off the calendar. We couldn't get those. And I did mark down some dates here that were possibly good dates for September the 12th, September the 26th. If you would look at your calendars and see if those dates were okay. The other dates, those are Monday dates, by the way, I'm sorry. And I didn't do any, the 2 Tuesday dates in September were taken. 26.
Could you refresh our memory, like as in mine?
Okay. So they're going to be going around for the listening forums, and those dates
They being
the ADE. I'm sorry, and so we couldn't.
In on Gotcha.
Yes.
There will be no one here to run the system.
Either one of those dates is good with me.
Say again? 12th and 26th? Okay. Same here, okay. Oh, okay. We got one.
I don't,
Dr. Arrow?
I know. I was just thinking, I wanted to put on your calendar the 26th and the 27th. Our office is hosting an Educational Innovation Summit here in Little Rock at the Marriott. It'll end by about 4:30 that on the 26th and then start again the next morning. But if you have the opportunity during the day and would like to join at the Education Innovation Summit, we would love to have you there because
Where's
there's going
that
to be it's going to be at the Marriott.
Okay.
I said Marriott Marquis, the Marriott in Little Rock downtown. And we're bringing in individuals from a variety of different schools across the country as well as across the state of Arkansas who are engaging in student-focused learning strategies. That's part of the work that our office gets to do is we've had the privilege to go out and see what's going on where people are kind of solving some of these issues, not on a big district scale, but sometimes on a smaller scale. Some of them happen to be charters, some of them happen to be regular, non-charter school districts. And one of the advantages that I keep thinking about, eventually we'll get to the part that I really, that's part of what really ignites my energy, and that is how do we design programs within our schools that our kids are excited to, that we re-engage that sense of passion to be there for the day where kids really want to be in that school. Well, there's so much opportunity in Arkansas because we have a policy environment that allows for our public schools to do waivers through either districts of innovation, schools of innovation, or Act 1240 waivers. There's just district conversion. There are a lot of ways that our existing districts can take advantage of the policy environment we have right now to do some really neat things that echo some of what I was hearing you talk about in terms of the school-driven types of reforms. And that's the sort of thing that our office gets to go out and see and bring those ideas back to Arkansas. And the Educational Innovation Summit is an opportunity to bring individuals in to work with teachers and leaders about what does it look like? How do we do this every day? What does it mean for your students? How has it been helpful in terms of their communities, in terms of their students? So it'd be a great opportunity for you to see some really neat and just very inspiring people who are going out of their way to make incredible things happen, some of them within structures that can be constraining, and they find ways around that. So I would love for you all, if you have the time, on the 26th or the 27th to drop in to the Innovation Summit. I said that, I meant what, because I couldn't be here on the 26th, but the 12th I'm actually going to be on the way to Atlanta for an ESSA meeting for the Every Student Succeeds Act. And that's where it would really behoove us to do what we can to get information started that informs the work of this group, but also helps inform that larger picture for ESSA, because those listening forums are going to be so important. And what we learn through this group can also help inform ESSA as well. So that's the 12th is I would be out for, but I can be here for the 26th and would love to have you all join us at any
Would
point.
you mind sending us,
I'll be happy
not
to.
a formal invitation, but sort of a reminder by email so we
Yes.
can have all
Yes.
the details that we'll need? Thank you.
Yes, and I'll direct you to where you can see who's coming and what they're going to be talking about. And you can even, if you get really motivated, you can go out and kind of take a look at what they're doing in their schools and see what they've got going on. It's pretty exciting, so.
I will add that I'm unavailable on the 12th. I actually will be out of town as well. But I think it also matters what's going to be on our agenda for the next meeting. I don't want us to meet because we feel like we have to meet unless there's work to be done.
Correct.
Absolutely.
So maybe we should talk about what else we need to do while we wait on SERPI to answer our questions or consider other researchers to answer our questions.
Okay.
So that's to the board in general.
Good
Like
thought.
what else we need to do?
Dr. Arola almost said it correctly. Arola, sorry.
You're fine.
Having come from a government institution background, I'm a little uneasy about only having one contender.
Right, right.
I think it would be important for us to have at least one other to consider. And I think I'm inviting your input.
Okay.
I have maybe a couple of ideas, but.
And if you have some ideas, I would love for you to share. It's like I said, that space of work is not one that I'm familiar in. I'm more familiar in, our focus is very different. So I'm willing to go out and contact whomever, and I'm also willing, we can look and see what else is out there and who we can find. You all even suggested that you have some entities that you know, so.
Yeah, I'll look up those questions, and to the extent I can identify other researchers who might be able to focus in, I'm happy to share those.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So with that being said, the 26th, you want to give them an opportunity to try to get us some information back by the 26th if possible?
Will they have information for us at least a week prior to that, so I can load it into the agenda?
In terms of that, yes, we were just talking about turnaround for what timeline and the information we talked about, that scope and timeline piece, and then also we could have that. That would be by the 19th, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It occurs to me that, given the breadth of the questions that we've been asked to answer, there may not be any single research institution that specializes in all of those. And so we may be looking at multiple consultants or a project manager that can subcontract with multiple entities. But I don't know that we can answer all of the questions that have been posed to us, but I want to do our best to answer them or develop plans to have them answered before we submit a final report. The other agenda item for the next meeting, I think, will be for us to report back on the comments from the Board of Education on our initial report and see if we have any changes in our marching orders.
Okay.
That's a good point.
That's a great point, yeah.
That's going to be the 9th. Our support's being submitted the 9th, Deborah?
I think that's September the 9th.
September the 9th is when our report is, 9th.
Due date, right?
Let me look.
At 9 o'clock in the morning was what I have a note.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I think that's probably.
So our next meeting's on the 26th.
Yes. And then at that meeting, we'll look at dates again, if that's okay.
Sure.
Any other questions, concerns? With that, yes, ma'am.
I just got a question. I'm just kind of like having something in my head right now for Mr.
Jordan.
Yeah.
Jordan.
Yeah. Okay. This is just something that it's coming in all the schools in Little Rock. How do you want to be able to approach the parents? Because you say that you're going to have like graphics and things, like the support of the parents, and you're going to reach at them, but how you will do it? I just want to, this question is just, how do you give them information in the feedback from the parents from different schools?
Are you asking, like, how do we go about our research and
Yes.
understanding what parents want? So there are a couple ways to do this. We've been doing focus groups that I mentioned earlier in Camden, and that's when you impanel, basically it's a random sample from the system, and you sit down with them for a day and go over a series of questions that we call a protocol. But I'm not sure that's actually answering your question.
Well, because you said you want to have sitting group with parents, and you're gonna ask them, how do you gonna connect with the parents? Are you gonna call them? Are you gonna, we have seen the little influence, on the parents. Not all the parents are putting like volunteers hours in the school. So how are you going to be able to reach them? I don't know if someone can help me with that question.
Yeah, I wonder if this is sort of yeah. Go ahead.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think what she's asking is, you have kind of a history of missing parents when we do outreach in the district. Is that what you were getting at? And so how would you go about, as a researcher, if you're going to be calling in parents to be a part of a focus group or to do complete a survey, how do you ensure that you're reaching the parents, particularly the parents of the students who I think are the ones who have the highest needs? I think there's a significant portion of the population in this region who feel like they've been left out of the conversation.
Sure. And it might be that, that there's only so much a research organization can do to actually get at that. But, and if it looks like we can't get an accurate representation, then we wouldn't go about trying to impanel, in-person meetings. There are other ways to get at what parents want, using more objective measures than, doing one-on-one interviews or focus groups. You really have to just look at this. It's hard to say beforehand. It sounds, though, like a lot of what is at issue here is what happens after the research, which is, how do you engage families around next steps with strategy? And it's hard to know before you know what you're going to recommend or how you're going to go about developing those recommendations. So, if it's a stakeholder group, that's one thing. If it's allowing input in a request for proposals, for example, for a new program or a new school, and then how do you actually get the parents that are often left out? Well, that sort of trickles into implementation and away from research. And I'd hesitate to tell you as a, university staff how to go about actually making sure that the parents are engaged and informed and participating.
I move we adjourn. Mr. Chairman, you were about to ask for a motion, weren't you?
Was there any public comment?
We have any public comments?
Jim doesn't want to hear from the public.
I love hearing from the public.
Yes, sir. Can you say?
My name's Lil Lewis. I've got one kid in the Little Rock School District right now, and another on the way. Gonna be coming in a couple of years. This is
Can you
important.
talk up just a little bit?
This is important to me. I love my kids, and it's important to all the parents out there. They're trying to find the best place to send their kids. Choice is a wonderful thing, but you all need to think about specifics like transportation and how they're going to get there to make it equitable. I can take my kids. I've got a flexible schedule. A lot of people don't. They need to be able to get their kids there. Just having a choice and being able to get enrolled into one may be a first step, but getting there every day so that it does not impact these people and their ability to do their jobs and pay their bills is important. And I'm sorry, I'm very emotional. This is important.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate you coming. I wish we had more parents coming out every single time we meet. Thank you for supporting us and for coming and talking.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. You got to say something.
Yeah, I do. I appreciate you coming too, and I think it, in my opinion, highlights the other side of the coin that you strengthen the traditional schools where that's in those options that are already there, where people not feel like they have to or think they have to or whatever the reason is, that's not the only option. Where there are traditional school options where you don't feel like you have to leave work to get your kids somewhere. I think that's part of our charge too. Not only to think about that side of the coin, but the flip side of the coin. So I definitely respect what you're saying as well. So now you can vote.
I wouldn't dream of making that motion.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'll motion for adjournment.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. No nays. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.